Please excuse my clumsy delivery. The movie is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. So, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is the story of Nick Cage, the legendary actor, or at least kind of a fictionalized version of him. Nick Cage is reaching a late stage in his career, and he's got a young daughter who's growing up and a wife who's currently getting a divorce from. And he decides that he thinks he might want to take a break from acting for a while. But then he gets an offer to come out to a billionaire's mansion out in the sunny coast of somewhere, Tuscany, I think, where he's paid $1 million to hang out with Pedro Pascal's character, who is this eccentric billionaire who's a tremendous fan of Nick Cage, and just maybe discover a little bit about himself. But upon exiting the plane for this sunny villa, he meets with a CIA op played by Tiffany Haddish, who tells him that Pedro Pascal's not all who he seems to be. And suddenly, Nick Cage is torn between a super fan and a CIA sting operation. It is an action comedy starring Nicolas Cage. It is in theaters right now. The movie is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Andy, what'd you think?
So this was all right. I had a good time. There are a lot of laughs. There's a lot of good in jokes. But it didn't quite go as overboard as I was hoping. Like for it being about Nick Cage, he wasn't very Nick Cage, which is known for being these kind of over the top performances or these really classic action scenes. It's kind of watered down, and so much so that like this movie you could just have generic, washed or aging film star looks to reignite career. Like you could have swapped in kind of anyone that's a big name in this, and so that's unfortunate. The first kind of half of the film is better than the last half. We kind of devolve into a bunch of action setups that aren't super fun or compelling and starts to drag. Pedro Pascal is really good as the kind of Nick Cage obsessed super fan. He's a lot of fun, and them as like this buddy cop thing is a lot of fun as well. So it was a good time. I did laugh a lot. There are a lot of good jokes, but it's the kind of thing it's definitely better in like a group of people.
Yeah, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is functionally a giant tribute to Nicolas Cage that also stands almost exclusively on his shoulders. I don't know if this would have worked with another actor or actress. I watched it with a buddy, and as we were walking out last night, I said, "Hey, do you think it would have worked with anybody else?" And he was like, "Maybe like a Bruce Willis type, like some kind of action star who's really generic. Maybe you could have done it that way." But Nick Cage is uniquely the talent that brings people to the theater and keeps them in the seats. He's pretty good in this movie. He's not quite full on, wild Nick Cage. You get some good stuff for sure. Some kind of glimmers and moments of Cage that are solid, and it's good to see him kind of stretching on his comedy chops again. Lately, the two big features I've seen him in are Mandy and Pig, also Color Out of Space, which is all right. So I'm glad to see him getting into a little bit of comedy again because he's good at it. Like Cage is a good comedy, is a good comic. I think he's got good sensibilities. Pedro Pascal, additionally, is kind of the super fan's a lot of fun. He's simple. He's a simple character, and I think Pascal knows it, so he plays him really solid. And otherwise, it's a pretty small cast. Otherwise, you don't have a whole lot else going on. That's pretty much where the budget went. It was those two.
Yeah, I was gonna say Pascal. I mean, he nearly outshines Cage in his own movie. He's just really solid from beginning to end.
Yeah. I think the film is, like I said during our Northman review, uniquely lopsided. I think the trailer gives you basically the first half of the film, and then kind of the second half is just kind of this loose run into this kind of action thriller style film with a little bit more going on at the end, and that stuff kind of uniquely doesn't work. I think the best parts of the movie are Nick Cage and Pedro Pascal hanging out. And that's kind of through our first two acts. And then come the third, it starts to get a little bit more serious. I guess that's what you'd expect from kind of a film that's a tribute to Nick Cage. You're going to need a little action and adventure at the end of it. Like you need a couple people getting out handguns and whatnot. But it feels a little tacked on, and it feels a little out of place. I think the movie kind of could have worked if they'd really just expanded that first half and ran with it. But if you're watching with a group of friends and you're coming to see a Nick Cage movie starring Nick Cage doing Nick Cage stuff, like it kind of, it checks the box, man. I can't say this movie doesn't do what it sets out to do. Like it definitely does. But it wasn't the script wasn't quite as tight as I expected.
Yeah, it didn't lean into it as much as I would have thought. I was expecting some huge over the top performances, you know, because Nick Cage is known for like these great monologues or these great parts where he's just like 150% kind of overacting, and we don't really get any of that as much. And you know, we get a lot of tributes to his older movies, but again, I think a big tribute would have been some really crazy action scenes. And I'm reminded of something like Hot Fuzz, which is a parody of buddy cop action movies, but it itself is a really great buddy cop action movie. And so I was hoping we would kind of get more of a parody, just something more over the top, more funny, more jokes. Just
Yeah,
and
that's
we
funny.
didn't.
The film I kind of had definitely I think I kind of had a thought of Hot Fuzz somewhere in here, but the movie I kept thinking about was Tropic Thunder. Um, sorry, it's a movie about a bunch of actors and a comedy about a bunch of actors who travel to a remote part of the world to try to immerse themselves in a role and end up like taking part in a giant operation they didn't know, and it turns this whole comedy thing. Similar in tone, I think. Also reminds me a little bit in its finest moments. It reminded me a little bit of like a Charlie Kaufman script, almost like Being John Malkovich or Adaptation, in that it's very meta. Like you're watching a movie about Nick Cage doing Nick Cage stuff, and you kind of know it's a fictionalized version of him, but you can't help but like understand that in the moment. And then our characters start talking about making their own movie in one scene, and then they're like, well, this should be this, and you're like, this can't be too much. And in its worst parts, it feels a bit like an SNL sketch, and I think that's okay, because again, like the movie is just a vehicle for Nick Cage to be Nick Cage. I think the problem comes from probably its director. Tom Gormican has directed one other feature before this. It was a movie in 2014 called That Awkward Moment. And if you don't remember it, it's because it wasn't a really big deal. He also directed some episodes of the show Ghosted in 2018. Other than that, this is his second feature film, and it kind of shows. Like I think Pedro Pascal and Nick Cage are doing a lot of the heavy lifting on screen to keep things interesting, but it's got some continuity errors. There's definitely some problems with kind of like the general pacing. uh, that's where I think the biggest issue comes from. I think they just were a little limited in every other aspect outside of their spend to get Nick Cage and Pedro Pascal in this movie. Like that's kind of
Yeah,
yeah.
there's also kind of too much going on. There's a little bit of the kitchen sink issue where, you know, the premise of him coming out to, you know, to this guy's birthday party as a super fan and the awkwardness there. It's a great premise, but then like you introduce this whole kind of accent subplot where, you know, Tiffany Haddish is a CIA agent. They recruit Nick Cage to do CIA stuff, and it's almost too many chefs in the kitchen. And I think the action CIA plot is what works the least about this.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, the stuff that works the best is the kind of buddy comedy, the two of these guys hanging out and kind of being goofy Nick Cage fans together, right? And talking about Face Off and Con Air. The movie features a bit of footage from those films, which is nice. It's definitely got some props from other Nick Cage movies. Gone in 60 Seconds, the chainsaw from Mandy shows up at one point. Like for what it is, if you are a Nick Cage fan, I would be hard pressed to say there's a better tribute to the man than this movie. Like it's really tremendous. But if you took Nick Cage out of it and you swapped out with another actor, I feel like it'd be a little middling.
Yeah.
and that's okay, right? Like that doesn't look. It's a comedy. It's not trying to win an Oscar or anything.
Well, one of the things that I was reading that they actually covered up a number of Nick Cage's tattoos because the character is actually it's not Nick Cage. It's again, like we said, a version of him, which is kind of weird. So, but it's like it's a more tame, watered down version, I guess, which is it's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, it's yeah, like and that's an odd thing to see in the film. Like I've seen, if you've made it this far in our review, I'd assume you've at least seen a couple interviews with Nick Cage. You might have seen photos of him in public. He's a pretty wacky dude, and this movie is like a tame version of him. He's not quite that wacky here. He kind of reaches that peak at a couple points, but like, dude, he makes some unique outfit choices in his actual life, and those aren't really present here. So I think that's okay. Yeah, I don't expect this to be, like a biting documentary or anything, but it is it's a little challenging to get into. Yeah, at some point you start to realize like this is kind of a a weak script with a strong actor wrapped around it, and that's not bad. But it's it is what it is. Still a few good laughs. I'll admit, like it's funny in spots definitely, but I think low expectations are required for a movie called The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. It doesn't pretend to be like some super deep or even hilarious movie. It does look funny. It is funny. There are plenty of laughs. Passes the 6 laugh test.
Yes.
Um, a lot of it only works in a group or in a like we saw it in a fairly packed theater. So it's one of those kind of funny films, something you put on casually, make a drinking game out of, maybe that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Andy, any other thoughts for recommendations?
I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent?
I would say save it for streaming if you're a big Nick Cage fan or you're a Nick Cage completionist, which would be difficult. He's made over 100 films, which is
Oh
incredible.
yeah, that's wild.
Um, yeah, so if you're a fan, definitely check it out. It is a lot of fun. Like I said, it can wait for streaming if you're a little unsure. Definitely better in a group. If you are going to go to see it in the theater or with friends, but probably just wait for streaming.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. Like if you've got a bunch of buddies or friends you want to go see it with, and y'all are all going to get a laugh out of watching Nick Cage or Nick Cage stuff, sure. Otherwise, wait for streaming. Like you definitely do not. There's nothing particularly theatrical about this experience. If anything, it'll probably better at home. So yeah, I don't. I wouldn't bend over backwards to go see it or anything. It's fine. It's fine. I like this movie fine. I guess I had hoped it'd be a little more. I don't know. I hope I'd still be chewing on it a couple days from now, but it's okay. I don't need my comedy script to get incredibly meta or anything. Like it's 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 a good Nick Cage flick. I think it's a fine Nick Cage flick. That's what I think, and that's The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.